Hello everyone, welcome back to Unveiling Mythical Legends. Today, we're going to take you through the tragic and heroic tale of one of the figures in ancient Greek mythology, Bellerophon. You may have heard of this name before, but today we'll dive deeper into his complex and fascinating fate. From his family background, an accidental killing, to his struggles and conflicts with destiny, Bellerophon's life was full of adventures, victories, and even failures. Let's explore the profound lessons behind this hero's story and draw wisdom from it. If you enjoy this content, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you won't miss any exciting mythical stories. Also, feel free to share it with your friends so more people can discover these classic tales. We're looking forward to seeing your thoughts and discussions in the comments. Bellerophon, though perhaps not a name that rings a bell for many, is a hero in ancient Greek mythology. You may have seen his name in textbooks or novels, but if you delve deeper into his story, you'll find that it is much more complex and captivating than you might have imagined. Bellerophon was the son of King Glaucus of Corinth and the grandson of the famous Sisyphus. Speaking of Sisyphus, you may already be familiar with his name. He was the king who was punished by Zeus for his cunning ways, condemned to eternally roll a massive stone uphill, only for it to roll back down whenever he got close to the top, an endless cycle from which he could never escape. Bellerophon's family background undoubtedly cast a shadow over his fate, but his story was not merely a continuation of this doomed legacy. Bellerophon's fate began with an unintentional murder that abruptly took away his stable life. After an accidental killing, Bellerophon had no choice but to flee his home and go to Tiryns in search of a way out. Just when he thought he was trapped, destiny seemed to play a small trick, leading him to the protection of King Pegasus. Pegasus welcomed Bellerophon with open arms, and his situation, which had seemed so desperate, was in stark contrast to the warmth of the king's hospitality. This protection made Bellerophon feel a rare sense of comfort, and he even thought he might finally escape his past shadows and regain his footing. Not only did Pegasus forgive him for his mistakes, but he treated him with the respect and care that only a king could provide. However, life is never that simple. In Pegasus' palace, Bellerophon encountered an unexpected problem. Pegasus' wife, Athena, the beautiful queen, was deeply attracted to Bellerophon's handsome appearance and developed an uncontrollable love for him. For Bellerophon, this emotional projection created a significant amount of pressure. Though he never expressed any affection toward Athena, her feelings gradually became a part of his life. At this point, Bellerophon found himself in a situation full of contradictions and tension. On one hand, he appreciated Pegasus' protection, but on the other, Antia's emotions made him feel deeply conflicted, slowly drawing him into an emotional whirlpool that was difficult to escape. Bellerophon did not respond to Antia's feelings, which was undoubtedly a heavy blow to her. Unable to accept rejection, the queen's anger and shame pushed her to extreme actions. In revenge, Antia began to distort the truth to King Pegasus, slandering Bellerophon, portraying him as an untrustworthy and immoral villain. Her lies spread quickly, eventually leading Pegasus to believe these unfounded accusations. When Pegasus learned of the rumors, his first reaction was to have the young man executed. After all, in ancient Greek politics and society, punishments for disloyalty or improper conduct were often extremely harsh. However, despite the success of Antia's scheme in sowing doubts in the king's mind, Bellerophon's behavior remained graceful, calm, and likable. His composed demeanor and loyalty to his host made Pegasus internally conflicted. As a king, Pegasus knew how difficult it was to decide whether to execute someone, especially when this young man seemed to have no evil nature. Pegasus' heart was full of contradictions. He couldn't easily decide to put Bellerophon's life in jeopardy. So, Pegasus made another decision. He chose to send Bellerophon to his father-in-law, King Iobates of Lycia, hoping that Iobates would handle the execution. This was Pritus' way of passing the burden onto someone else, believing that it would resolve his internal dilemma and absolve him of the responsibility of directly taking action against Bellerophon. Thus, Bellerophon set out on his journey to King Iabates' kingdom, carrying the king's orders, unaware of the deadly trap that awaited him. As Bellerophon traveled toward King Iabates' palace with the royal orders and a mysterious tablet, he was filled with unease, for he didn't know what fate awaited him. However, fate is always unpredictable, and whether a hero or a mortal, no one can foresee its twists. Upon reaching the palace of Iabates, Bellerophon's noble aura immediately caught the king's attention. The young man's innate elegance and composure made Iabates believe that he must be of noble descent. Perhaps it was his certain presence or his unconscious demeanor, but everything about him deeply charmed Iabates. In accordance with the ancient Greek customs of hospitality, Iabates did not immediately inquire about Bellerophon's background, but instead warmly hosted him for a full 9 days, treating the young man from another kingdom like the most esteemed guest. For those 9 days, Bellerophon enjoyed the luxury of the palace and the warm hospitality, and it seemed as though everything was moving toward reconciliation. But on the morning of the 10th day, Iabates finally could no longer resist asking the crucial question: who was Bellerophon, and what was his mission? Bellerophon handed the letter from Pritus to Iabates and briefly explained the details of his background. He didn't go into much detail about the false accusations against him, but simply told Iabates about the misunderstandings and conspiracies he had faced. The young hero did not appear regretful or doubtful of himself due to his circumstances. Instead, he calmly presented all the facts to Iabates, hoping for a fair treatment. After reading the letter, King Iabates was filled with conflicting emotions. His mind was flooded with questions and unease, for Pritus was not only his father-in-law, but also his ally, and the actions Bellerophon had committed were indeed severe, seemingly unforgivable. For a king in such a high position, this situation was a tremendous dilemma. Although Bellerophon's graceful demeanor and charming personality had made Iabates develop a liking for him, the contents of the letter were impossible to ignore. Was Bellerophon truly as innocent as the letter suggested? This uncertainty left Iabates torn. He understood that, as a king, he had to make a fair decision, not allowing personal feelings to influence his judgment. However, his affection for Bellerophon made it hard for him to make a final decision to execute the young man. Thus, Iabates made what he believed to be the most just choice. He would give Bellerophon a chance by assigning him a series of extremely challenging tasks. The dangers of these tasks were apparent, as each task could lead to Bellerophon's death, and perhaps these formidable challenges were the only way for him to prove his innocence. These tasks would not only test Bellerophon's courage and intelligence, but also challenge his character. Deep down, Iabates might have had a subtle hope that Bellerophon could overcome these difficult trials and gain the opportunity to prove his innocence, showing that he was not the villain he had been accused of being. The Chimera, a terrifying monster, would become Bellerophon's most daunting challenge. With the body of a lion, the middle of a goat, and the tail of a serpent, this creature could spew fire from its mouth, burning everything in its path. The monster's existence had brought disaster to the land, and it became the first major obstacle Bellerophon had to face in completing his tasks. At the time, the creature wreaked havoc on everything, and Bellerophon, the hero tasked with this mission, inevitably became the protagonist in this fierce battle. Facing such an enemy, Bellerophon felt a twinge of fear. He knew that this battle was far beyond what his physical strength alone could endure. So, with hope in his heart, he prayed to the gods, seeking their protection and asking for any help they might offer. In his prayer, the gods, including Zeus and Athena, heard his voice, and his faith was not ignored. However, instead of providing him with a sword or powerful weapons, the gods sent an immortal steed, Pegasus, to assist him. Pegasus, the winged horse born of Poseidon and Medusa, possessed immense strength and speed, and could fly through the skies. For Bellerophon, this was undoubtedly a tremendous aid. However, this divine steed was not easily tamed. It had its own will, and not just anyone could control it. Bellerophon put in great effort to tame this flying horse, but all his attempts were in vain. Time and time again, he tried to ride Pegasus, only to be rejected by the powerful steed. Just when he was exhausted and nearly unable to continue his struggle, fate gave him a turn of events. He fell into a deep sleep by the sacred spring of Pyrene, the weariness overtaking him, and his mood became heavier. But at that moment, the gods once again showed their grace. In his dream, Bellerophon saw the figure of Pallas Athena, the goddess of wisdom and battle, who gave him a magical bridle. This enchanted bridle would help him tame Pegasus. When Bellerophon woke up, he was surprised to find the magical bridle lying next to him, and Pegasus was quietly drinking from a nearby spring. Bellerophon quickly grabbed the steed's mane and put the magical bridle over its head, finally taming the divine winged horse. Then, Bellerophon mounted Pegasus and soared into the sky, ready to face the terrifying chimera. This victory in his adventure undoubtedly stunned King Iobates. He had originally been suspicious of Bellerophon's identity, as Proetus was his father-in-law, and the accusations Bellerophon faced made it difficult for him to believe the young man. However, with each crisis Bellerophon overcame, his courage and wisdom began to shine through. Iobates gradually moved from initial doubt to admiration. He began to think that perhaps this young man was not as evil as the rumors suggested, but instead had limitless potential. Next, Bellerophon was sent to face an even greater enemy, the Solymans, a fierce and ruthless tribe known for their combat skills and brutal tactics. They were terrifying both in strength and intellect. However, Bellerophon again met the challenge with his intelligence and bravery. The battle against the Solymans was not just a contest of strength, but also a test of strategy and courage. After a fierce battle, Bellerophon successfully repelled these powerful enemies, leaving everyone astonished. In King Iobates' mind, the image of this young hero gradually transformed from a fugitive clouded in suspicion to a true warrior. However, the adventure was far from over. Bellerophon's next challenge was the Amazons, a female tribe renowned for their warrior prowess. Their tactics and skills were terrifying, and they had repeatedly defeated enemies from all around. Yet, Bellerophon was undaunted and continued to use his fearless courage and intelligence to successfully defeat this powerful army. With each victory, Bellerophon gained more and more respect, gradually establishing himself in King Iobates' heart. As time went on, Bellerophon's pride and vanity began to grow. After countless adventures and victories, his fame spread far and wide. Whether on the battlefield or in the court, Bellerophon's heroic image was deeply ingrained in the hearts of people. Having reached the peak of worldly success, an indescribable confidence began to blossom within him, and he even became somewhat arrogant. No longer satisfied with just being a brave warrior, he began to seek higher goals, attempting to challenge the authority of the gods and ascend to a height no one had ever reached. One day, Bellerophon, in a fit of ambition, decided to ride his winged horse Pegasus directly to the heavens, intending to stand side by side with the gods and prove his invincibility. This act was undoubtedly a sign of disrespect toward the gods, and such a transgression was intolerable to the deities of that time. Zeus, as the king of the gods, was particularly enraged by Bellerophon's challenge. He believed that the young hero had lost the proper reverence for the gods, becoming too arrogant, and had crossed the boundary of what even the gods could tolerate. To punish Bellerophon's pride, Zeus decided that he would pay a price. He sent a gadfly to sting Pegasus, and the powerful winged horse, disturbed by the bites, became agitated and uncontrollable. Bellerophon was thrown from the skies, falling from the edge of heaven into the abyss. His pride and vanity had ultimately led him to an unfortunate end. At that moment, Bellerophon felt the punishment of the gods for his disrespect. His heroic journey had come to an end. He fell from the heavens, plunging into the bottomless abyss, his heart filled with regret and sorrow. This fall made him deeply realize that no matter how powerful humans may be, when faced with the power of the gods, they cannot defy fate. Bellerophon's fate was never as glorious as he had expected. From a valiant hero to a fallen figure at the hands of the gods, his downfall seemed to symbolize the disaster brought about by excessive pride. When he fell from Pegasus, the wheel of fate began to turn swiftly, pushing this once celebrated hero into a deep abyss of loneliness and regret. After the fall, Bellerophon did not immediately die, but his life was filled with remorse and melancholy. He had once possessed everything: heroic status, worldly glory, even the protection of the gods. But all of this vanished because of his arrogance and challenge to the gods. The amazing adventures of his past could now only serve as shadows in his mind, and he painfully reflected on his mistakes, consumed with endless self-blame and regret. Bellerophon's soul was deeply scarred, and he gradually withdrew from society, living a life of isolation and desolation. Whenever night fell, he could never escape the mistakes of his past and the vanity he once had. This life eventually drained him of all his brilliance, and his heroic aura faded into obscurity until he died alone. Though he had no opportunity to redeem himself after death, Bellerophon's story was not forgotten. The people of Corinth revered him as a hero and viewed his grand adventures as a cautionary tale, reminding future generations not to be blinded by vanity and pride. To honor the former hero, the Corinthians buried him in the grove of Poseidon and built an altar in his memory. This altar became a monument to Bellerophon, symbolizing a reminder for every hero striving for excellence. Before achieving glory, one must first learn humility and respect. Bellerophon's life may have been filled with regrets, but it is through his story that the world understands more clearly that, in the face of immense success and honor, one must proceed with caution and humility to avoid falling into the abyss of arrogance. That's all for today's story. The ups and downs of Bellerophon's life teach us that no matter how powerful a hero may be, they cannot escape the will of fate. From his story, we see the cost of pride and arrogance, and this lesson shows that every hero should remain humble and respect the greater forces than themselves. If you enjoyed this story, remember to subscribe to our channel and click the like button so we can bring you more fascinating mythological tales. If you have any thoughts or questions, feel free to share them in the comments. We are looking forward to interacting with all of you. Thank you for watching and see you next time.